Before we get into today's episode, let me ask you something. Do you know what your current level of English really is? Understanding your level is crucial to tracking your progress and ensuring your hard work is paying off. That's why I've created a quick and easy English level test that you can take right now for free. Find out your level instantly. Just head to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/testme or check the link in the show notes. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the British English Podcast, where we delve into British culture and at the same time teach you British English. For today's episode, we welcome a man called Lawrence on to talk about the cooking videos on his YouTube channel called Brilliantly British, where he focuses exclusively on British dishes. And as I'm sure you have heard of the stereotype and might even think it's true that our cuisine is rather rubbish, I wanted to test whether that really is the case. And who better to ask than a man who has dedicated a huge amount of time to making over 160 British dishes on his channel. That's right. There are at least 160 British dishes. Just a heads up as well, we talk about food a lot, and Lawrence provides us with some very nice food vocabulary, many of which are surprisingly irregular in the way they are conjugated. So listen out for them, and since we talked so much about food, you might not want to be hungry going into this one. So grab yourself a cup of tea and maybe a slice of carrot cake and enjoy. Have you ever wondered if you're making real progress in your English learning journey? Knowing your level is the key to recognizing your improvements. I have a fantastic tool for you, a free English level test that gives you an instant result. Take a few minutes now to discover your level and continue your learning journey with confidence. Visit thebritishenglishpodcast.com/testme or click the link in the show notes to find out your level of English today. Hello, Lawrence. How are you?
Hi, Charlie. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for being on the show. Just before we hit record, you mentioned that you've just popped back to the UK. Can you tell everybody where you are normally residing and why you're back in the UK for a bit?
I live in a small town called Wettingen in Switzerland. It's about 20 minutes away from Zurich, just to help people and give them some reference.
Yeah.
I moved there because I work there as a mechanical engineer. I'm just popping back home for a few weeks just to see family, friends, and just actually because I'm getting married in about 2 months' time. So I'll just return to the UK to get a few things sorted.
Wow.
Before heading back to Switzerland.
Oh my goodness me! So I'm engaged to be married, and
congratulations! Yeah,
thank you, and congratulations to you. And it makes me want to ask you a lot of questions all about weddings. But I do want to ask you, are you enjoying or have you enjoyed the process of planning the wedding?
I have to be honest, my fiance has done the majority of the planning. She's
no surprises there.
She's an event manager.
Oh, wow.
She studied event management. So she's very much passionate about pulling strings, getting people to collaborate and work together, and scheduling and things like that. So she's very good at it, and I'm more than happy to step back and just make some overarching decisions of just yes, no, just things like that.
Very mature of you. Impressive to be so wise to do that. Yeah. And does she want to talk about it often?
It did. Every conversation we've had, it has come up just with regards to what I would need to do from my side in terms of the guests that I'm going to invite, whether I've organised things on my side, just things like that. To be honest, things were organised by her in a relatively short period of time. So now, as we're in the last 2 months or a month and a half, we're just doing the little things like well, I just recently got my suits sorted for myself and my best men, just things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're going with best men rather than a best man, similar to me. Why are you doing that?
So actually, if I could correct myself, I've got a best man and then there's groomsmen.
Okay.
I'll have some groomsmen.
Yeah.
My best man will have a matching, for instance, we'll just have like a matching suit to myself. My groomsmen will have something similar, but our ties will be different, something like that. I went for the setup of a best man and then groomsman because I do have very few friends, and so it was quite hard for me to really single out someone and say, right, you have got this honor, you've got the honor and responsibility. So in the end, I kind of just put them all on a level platform, not to make anyone feel left out. Yeah.
Good. Wise decision yet again. Okay. You're 2 months away from getting married and you're back here to do a little bit of that, or back there because I'm in Australia. Did you say that you're an engineer?
Yes, I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. Yeah.
Mechanical engineer. Okay. And your YouTube channel is very far from being showing that side of you.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's an interesting one because how it started, I guess, might as well get into that. It's I was doing an internship, give or take 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, and I was just working with colleagues of mine who were from all over Europe. And whenever the topic of food did come up, particularly, national dishes, British food was just, for want of a better phrase, was just getting a lot of much to be desired. Whenever they traveled to the UK and had British food, they had nothing beyond, just fish and chips or a full English breakfast. And I was always I found myself often being the person fighting in the corner of the UK, just to kind of make a point that there's so much more to British food and it's not as bad as their unfortunate experiences were.
I'd like to let you know that we now have an official app released for the British English podcast. You can now listen to this podcast on the new app and get all of the learning resources along with it. And for those of you who are just listening on your favourite podcast app, then I've got a present for you. Download the app, sign up to the course called Free Podcast Worksheets, and you will find every single episode available for you to listen to along with the free worksheet for that episode. A huge resource right there waiting for you to enjoy. So go download it right now at your app store, either by typing in BEP, or the British English Podcast. Links are also in the show notes. Enjoy this episode. I love the fact that this just it sounds like it was an argument that came up in the pub and you've dedicated, I think, at least a couple of years and you've created over 100? How many videos now?
About 160, 161, I think, to date. Episodes. I'm still on the journey of proving a point.
Have they sat down and said, mate, I get it. You've made your point.
So the thing is that I can see that they watch our content and also they follow us on Instagram. I can see that. So no one said it to my face as of yet. However, I think by now, I think I've firmly made the point that there's so much more to British cuisine than just 2 dishes. Give or take 5 or 6 on the channel that are my own, let's say, unique creations. The rest are British dishes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What were those 2 that you often hear? You said, we're known for those 2 dishes.
Full English and fish and chips.
Yeah.
Without fail.
Yeah. Fair. So let's see. If a non-native came to the UK and they said, right, well, I'm here for a couple of days. I'd like you to prove your point. What do you think I should have?
As in what they should go out and eat, or I don't know what I would prepare for them, or
let's go down both avenues separately. So let's imagine we're eating out in this case.
So I take them to. That's a good question, actually, because there's another point of mine. Actually, it's just that I'm not too aware of British, English, Welsh, or Scottish, or Irish, for that matter, restaurant. The only place I can think of in London that I've been to that I would say actually I'd take them to, I think, Fine Dining Room, it's called. And that restaurant is it's a Michelin star restaurant, but they specialize in pies and pastries. you'll get game pies, obviously beef Wellington, and some other pies like that. But this is, fine dining, Michelin star restaurants, and it is English. At least for anyone visiting the UK, they'll get a proper taste of, and they'll actually see how passionate we are as the UK when it comes to pies and pastries of that kind anyway.
Yeah.
So that would probably be somewhere that comes to mind.
Yeah. So a pie or pastry. And what meal are we doing this for? Breakfast, lunch or dinner?
This would be for dinner because it's quite a heavy thing.
Uh-huh.
Personally, I avoid heavy meals for lunch just because then I'll feel quite lethargic afterwards, a bit sluggish. Yeah, it'd probably be a nice dinner.
Yeah. I mean, looking at your YouTube channel, you have so many dishes that I have never tried and I've never seen on a menu. Do you feel like the cuisine doesn't show up in the restaurants in the UK?
I'd say so. The few times I do find myself in a restaurant, because I'll be honest, I don't eat out that much.
Well, why would you when you've got such a passionate home?
When I am out and for instance, when I am, let's say, at a pub, because that's where you would typically find the more traditional British dishes. Some of the dishes on there, you do have things like pies, you do have, of course, fish and chips, you do have breakfasts of some sort, but the rest of the menu tends to be kind of either a borrowed American dish or something that we've adopted from other countries. It could be an Italian dish that's been anglicized or Thai or Southeast Asian dishes or something like that. That's what I typically find. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that a lot of the dishes on the channel you haven't heard of. I'm still on this learning curve of myself discovering all these dishes, and I usually dive straight in because I'm fascinated and want to try this dish, apart from the fact of, I want to prove a point. It's part of the motivation.
Yeah, nice. It's interesting to hear. Yeah, I agree. We adopt a lot of other cuisines and we put it into our menus. What's the starting point for you when you try to think up a new video? Is it because you've found a new food and you're like, right, I've got to make that? Or are you deliberately searching for these dishes that have kind of been put aside and forgotten?
It's never there's several ways that I go about it. So at the stage that I'm at, we often get requests from some of the people who are fans of the channel. So recently had a request for a gypsy tart. I'm not familiar with that at all. I've had to do some rudimentary basic research, and it's something that I find interesting. Again, I've never tried it before. And so I'll do an episode, I'll do my research, and I'll look up how other people have made it, see if I'm happy to make it the same way, or if I see an area where it could be made better or tweaked or adapted, and then I'll set about getting the ingredients, and on during the week or on a weekend I'll set up the lights, camera and film.
Very nice. Okay, a gypsy tart. I've never heard of a gypsy tart before. Can you try to describe it for people, unless they
Yes.
if they can't Google it?
Yeah. So this is very rudimentary research so far. I've only just made an ingredients list, and based off of the ingredients list, the two main ingredients are muscovado sugar and evaporated milk. So from the get-go, for those who are familiar with those two ingredients, you will know this is going to be for individuals with the sweetest tooth. The filling, which consists of those two ingredients, is going to be held in a short crust pastry. There'll probably be eggs in there as well, if I'm not mistaken. It almost have the similar consistency as some sort of custard tart, but as I said, it'll be on the extreme end on the sweetness scale for sure.
Very nice. I look forward to seeing it on the channel. Yeah. So gypsy tart. Okay. What's another dish that you'd like to talk about that you've done? I just wanted to check in with you about something. Are you one of those language learners who often thinks, am I actually making any progress with my English? Is what I'm doing to study actually working for me? Or am I just wasting my precious time here? Well, if you think this way, then I'd like to encourage you to take action on this. Imagine how much more motivated you would be to put time and effort into your English studies if you knew that every time you studied, you would be guaranteed to be making significant progress. How much more satisfying would that be? So what do we need to do in order to find more clarity around this issue? Well, tracking your progress is a wonderful way to show evidence of your language skills having actually improved. And to track progress, the first thing you need to do is understand what level you are currently at. If you haven't taken a level assessment recently, then I highly recommend using my free test that will instantly tell you your level of English. Once you know this, you can start tracking your progress, which comes in many forms based on personal preference and your level of English. But that's a conversation for another time. For now, though, make sure you check your level of English with my free level checker, which is available over on thebritishenglishpodcast.com/freebies. That is thebritishenglishpodcast.com/freebies, or find it in the show notes of this episode.
This would probably be something else, another sweet dish. Probably my favorite, if not one of. It's called lardy cake. It's not too old, and speaking from the perspective of someone from the UK, that means not too old means around 200 years old. As the name suggests, it's a cake that has lard as the main ingredient, but it's sweet. So this is something that we're not used to, and in essence, almost it's akin to the American cinnamon roll, because you make a yeasted dough, you roll it out into a massive rectangle, and you cream sugar and lard together, and you spread the sugar and lard over this massive rolled out rectangle of dough, and you roll it.
Wow.
And then you just arrange it in your tray, and you allow it to rise because it's yeasted to double in size, and then you bake it. And what you get is, which shocked me, was the most amazing. What you end up with is a nice crust on top, because what happens is a lot of the lard seeps out as it's cooking and forms this kind of caramel at the bottom. So when you cut a slice of it, you've got the ring, that ring pattern because you rolled it. But on the underside, when you take a piece out, it's already glazed itself.
Wow.
On the underside.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. And before you roll it on top of that creamed lard and sugar, you sprinkle some candied peel or dried fruits. So there are some raisins or fruits in there, and in the upper, it was so good that I've been developing a modern recipe which will incorporate chocolate and nuts, and then that'll really make it align. That'll really align it with our modern preferences, let's say.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. Yeah. I'm watching it now on fast, double speed, and it's amazing to have you narrating your show whilst I'm watching it. That's fantastic. What an opportunity. Very clear demonstration from both your video and from you talking through it there. So yeah, that is lardy cake. And is there an interesting backstory to lardy cake, or do you know much about that?
So
when you research these, do you do that?
So I know a little bit about it. I know, for one, the reason it came into existence was because it was developed by people who didn't have so much money. That was why they used lard instead of butter. Mm-hmm. That was the main reason for it. And you can imagine what I recently learned is a lot of the modern leavening agents that we use, things like baking powder and things like that, they're quite modern. When you go back in time, you realize everything that was leavened, that was spongy, was yeasted, everything, sweet or savory. And it just, the thing is, I'm learning to appreciate, because not only does the yeast, of course, leaven anything that it's in, it does add that aromatic element to it. And especially with that kind of cake, it's just, for me, fantastic and delicious.
Very nice. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Beautiful. So would you agree with the statement that you have a sweet tooth?
Oh, I most definitely have a sweet tooth. most definitely.
And do you think that we are strongest in our desserts as a cuisine, or would you push back on that?
From time to time, actually, I find myself on either end of from time to time, swaying from one side to the other. When it comes to, heavy, hearty, rich, fulfilling meals, there's no doubt we've got them. We've got bucket loads of them. If it's just a typical Sunday roast, if it's a stew, a casserole. I've recently done a few, like a steak and kidney pudding, which took about 4 hours to prepare. You've got to slow steam that in suet pudding. So that is a very heavy, hearty dish, but it is delicious. And so if I was to base my opinions based off of that, I would say we're very strong in the savory, fulfilling, hearty winter dish category. But then, when I look at the things that I would describe as more elegant and refined, our culture of tea drinking, I look at things like the Battenberg cake, which I've got on the channel. That was amazing to make and so rewarding for me anyway when I finished it and I cut through it, and you've got that cross section of you've got the Battenberg cake, you've got coffee walnut cakes, you've got all sorts of biscuits. One of the most recent one was the brandy snap biscuits, which I amended because they're not usually shaped like that, but I made them look like the Italian cannolis and then filled them with a brandy cream, again just to make it appeal to a wider audience, and it was amazing. So I'd say we've got it all, actually.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, we're the best of the best. We've got it all, baby.
I'd say we're up there with the French.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The French are going to be spitting their champagne out at this. Okay, let's go back to the Battenberg cake. So is there any interesting reason? I probably should know this.
The colours?
There's a reason why it exists.
Yes, so the cake was a creation of the royal family patisserie chefs because it was to commemorate the union between Prince Albert and Princess, later Queen Victoria. Because Prince Albert descended from the Battenberg family. And so the colours of the cake are actually the colours of, I believe, his family crest.
Wow.
And so, of course, when I first learned about the cake, I did wonder why it had a Germanic name, and it's because of that influence from Prince Albert's side of the family, and it was adopted as a British cake to symbolise the union between the two. Yes, that's as I understand it. Yes, that's why.
Love it, and that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
yeah. It's not one of those cock and bull stories that you hear on a forum that then you tell to your mate at the pub. That sounds legitimate, yeah. Even though I don't know, but yeah. The egg banjo. What's that?
Ah, yes. So this is a term that we've kind of since dropped. We just call it egg and bacon sarnie now, But in the episode, I explain where the name comes from, and it simply comes from the fact that when American and British soldiers fought together, the British soldiers, when they had this sandwich, it would often be the case because of the yolk. They would bite into it and it would spill over their clothing. And so it was called a banjo because as they dust or try and scrape off the yolk that spilled on the uniform, it looks like they're playing the banjo instrument. That's why it's called an egg and bacon banjo. I actually demonstrate it in the episode.
Ah, brilliant.
And sacrifice a white t-shirt just to demonstrate it, yeah.
Oh, I've got to watch that. That's really funny. The banjo, yeah. Playing the banjo. That must mean that the banjo is more popular than any other string instrument then. The banjo is the one that looks a bit like a guitar, right? No?
Yeah, it looks like a tambourine, and to me, it looks like a tambourine and a guitar had a baby almost.
That's exactly it. Yeah, a tambourine with a guitar stick. Yeah, exactly. Very nice. I think it would be remiss of me not to mention Toad in the Hole.
Ah, yes.
What did... the journey that you went on making that video, was it an enjoyable one? And it was early on in your YouTube channel, so I imagine it was an obvious dish for you to go to.
One thing I must mention is that a lot of these videos, about 50% of the videos are actually made in the UK and 50 of them are made in Switzerland. So at the beginning, when I was in Switzerland, when I was making videos there in Switzerland, I had to do dishes that required me to that required ingredients that were easy for me to get hold of in Switzerland. Toad in the hole being one of, a dish that everyone knows and will have had at some point in their lives, and the ease being able to get the ingredients, I just thought, yeah, it was a no-brainer. I just do it and then do some research as much, because I try as much as possible to do some research and add some context and some background for the viewers as to where this dish originates from. But I don't want it to skew too much in the direction of history, because I want it to still be primarily a cooking channel. If I do want to add more information, I can put that in the description of the episode, because I have to balance being aware of the fact that people do have a relatively short attention span. I have to just get straight to the point as soon as possible. Toad in the hole. The name is quite strange. Based off of the research I did, I learned that it just simply came out of it was just a fun way of naming the dish. I've seen a lot of forums and a lot of discussions where people say, yeah, back then the belief was that if you really, really squinted your eyes and looked at the dish, it looked like toads coming out of the hole. I thought to myself, yeah, I don't really see it.
Were you squinting
I'll go
when you were?
Yeah,
I don't see it.
But I'll play along, But yeah, that was a fun dish to make, and yeah, that was one of the early ones you mentioned. And the thing is, I struggle now to watch some of the early ones because I wasn't as comfortable in front of the camera as perhaps I am now. Probably in the not too distant future, I will revisit some of those episodes and do them justice. let me say.
I know what you mean. I have the same feeling when I look at my stuff. I feel like in a year's time, I'll also look at my stuff that I'm making now and I'll still cringe. But I think it's a natural process. Yeah, there's loads and loads of dishes that I highly recommend everybody to go over to Brilliantly British, the YouTube channel, and check them out. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions that some of my students had for you, though. One of them was, what's up with mushy peas?
My theory on this, I don't know too much about where the mushy peas were cooked. And mushy peas were the result of the mistake of leaving the peas on the stove for just far too long. And it just happened to be something that was adopted. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. It was just that peas were often served with fish and chips. And as the day went by, they were always left on. And so as a result, they're being served from this big pot. And as a result, they just keep cooking. Maybe at the beginning of the service, when a shop opens, they're fresh and they're not mashed. But let's say by the time you're the last customer, this pot has still been over the heat, and it's
you've got a heavy-handed server, and he's like bored of his job. He's smashing the pot to bits, and by the end of the day, it's all soupy. Yeah,
exactly. And I guess we've just become accustomed to it. Now it's just a no-brainer for many of us. Of course, there are many people that don't like it. Understandably, just from visual appearance alone, it'll turn a lot of people off. But it's a strange one.
Yeah.
It's definitely quirky.
Yeah, it is. And I'm thinking of the other option that you can have with your chips, gravy. Would you have gravy with your chips?
I don't have any objection to it per se. It's just I don't want gravy with fish. Personally, I can see why you do it. Gravy, it's nice. It's a sauce. We do love our condiments in the UK. I don't object to it. I mean, the other alternative is curry sauce, isn't it?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I've never had curry sauce. I've always opted for mushy peas and tartar sauce.
Yeah. Funny. Condiments. Yeah, you mentioned condiments. Let's go in that direction. Yeah. So do you feel like the Brits are proud of their condiments?
Yeah, well, I think we are. And we've got a fair few, some of which are on the channel. We've got brown sauce, which I've had brown sauce throughout my life. There's always brown sauce in the cupboard or the fridge. However, when I did find out how the original brown sauce was made, the vast array of ingredients that it originally consisted of, I was quite surprised. I mean, at least 6 spices. You've got 8, maybe even 10 individual ingredients. You've got apples and things like that in there, dates, and it's just a very complex condiment. And when I did make it, it's just so much more. It just has so much more depth than the stuff that you would get than the typical HP sauce you'd get in the supermarket. And not to mention the fact that because it's quite acidic, you can just put it in a glass jar. You don't have to put it in the fridge, and you can just put it in the back of the cupboard and eat away at it gradually. And as time goes by, it's maturing and getting better.
Without any food?
Not me personally.
And never have too much mustard.
I've seen people do that with peanut butter, but I wouldn't do that with brown sauce personally.
Wow, I didn't know that it was such a complex sauce. And are you saying that the HP sauce is a watered down version of that, or just a less complex version?
Less complex, and that'll be the result of reduced cost. Because when I think about it, if HP sauce did consist of all those ingredients from scratch, it would cost a lot more than it does, and that probably put a lot of people off. So primarily, of course, they want to sell, so they've found substitutes. It's just when you have the original and you have that, you can just immediately taste the difference.
Yeah, and HP stands for Houses of Parliament, right?
Yes, it does.
And is there a reason why was it made in the Houses of Parliament for members of the Parliament? Do you know?
I'm not sure, actually. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'd actually have to look that up myself now. I never actually questioned that. Yeah, why?
Because they're very proud of it. They've got it on the label, haven't they?
Yes, that's the thing. I wasn't so sure about calling it HP sauce on the channel just because I didn't know if it would infringe on anything. So I just called it brown sauce. Uh-huh. And so as a result of being swept up in calling it brown sauce, I didn't think to look into why it's called Houses of Parliament HP sauce.
Yeah, that makes sense. So another question from another student, changed it a little bit, but it's still got the crux of the message in it. Do you think British cuisine is in fact on par with food from other countries? I mean, you've mentioned it a little bit, but I'd like to go a bit deeper. Do you think it is?
I'd say yes, given that I'm 160, maybe 60 plus episodes in.
You're not running out?
Oh, no, no, the backlog is ever growing.
Wow. But can I just challenge you to name 10 dishes right now?
You'll have Ecclefechan tarts. You'll have Yorkshire curd tarts. You'll have, of course, the classic roast. You'll have Shropshire pancakes. You'll have Cornish pasties, scones, clotted cream, steak and kidney pudding, fisherman's pie, omelette, Arnold Bennett.
Ding, ding, ding. 10. You got 10. Wow, yeah. There we go. That's a little snippet of how varied the dishes are on your channel. Yes. And how varied the British cuisine is. Nice. Yes. Okay, so yeah, carrying on. You think that there's just an insane amount out there that we can continue to discover, that you are doing so. Yeah. And the quality is there, would you say?
The quality is definitely there. As always, you can have an amazing recipe, of course, but it comes down to the amount of effort the individual is willing to put in, and the passion as well. So you can you can make a dog's breakfast of a classic meal. You can attempt a beef Wellington, which is a very prestigious, elegant dish. But if perhaps one doesn't have the ability to make it, neither wants to put in the time, then of course it turns out it can very easily turn out to be something quite underwhelming. This is what I'm realizing. Things like sticky toffee pudding, there are 2 of them on the channel. Both of them, I did my research and found out there was a classic version of the dish, and the simple changes of just the mold used, so that when you take it off, it just has a much more astonishing shape and look to it, and that's enough to lift it, because the flavor and the texture, no one, at least that I'm aware of, will have a dish like that, or many of the dishes on the channel, and especially when they're prepared properly, unless it's of course an acquired taste. I think they'll enjoy them. What I'm learning is that a lot of the British dishes are influenced by Germanic, French cultures, and it goes without saying that the French are very good at advertising their food. I think that's one of their strengths, actually, because again, I will reiterate the fact I think British food is just as good as any
I feel like there's a
cuisine.
I feel like there's a dig in that comment. They're very good at advertising it.
They are, and that's not to take. They're very good at advertising it. It's not to take away from the fact that their dishes are delicious. I feel in the UK, perhaps that's an area where we're lacking, where we don't shout about our dishes as much, because when I often, from time to time, when time allows, I do have guests over, and without fail, I will always cook something British for them, just because I'm sure they haven't had it before. So when I first started dating my fiance, her parents are Polish. She's Polish. I made a cottage pie,
Right.
and they'd never heard of that before, and they loved it. It became a family favorite. My fiance's mother learned how to make it themselves, and yeah, it was she loved it, but they had no idea. Again, they just knew just fish and chips and full English breakfast, and so it just comes down to the preparation and just introducing people to some of these dishes, and even a few pies I've made for them, as in actual encased pastry pies, and again, they loved it.
Wow. Apologies for blanking there, but did you say that your fiance's family are British?
Polish.
They're Polish. They're Polish. Okay, so
Yes.
that makes sense. The cottage pie was unknown to them. I was going to say,
Yeah.
if they're British, they probably were force-fed that before the age of 5. Yeah. Cottage pie is very nice. What does my mum make? Shepherd's pie. She likes a shepherd's pie. Do you like?
Oh yeah, yes,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Often confused with cottage pie, of
Yeah.
course.
What is the difference again?
So shepherd's pie is called shepherd's pie because of the lamb. So that's associated with
Yes. The mean shepherd killing his animals that he's looking after.
exactly. Exactly.
Keep an eye on them. Don't kill them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all we've got time for part 1. We're going to do a couple more parts, if you don't mind, and we'll get back to the condiments as well. But I'd like to go into your personal favourites and maybe talk about some more dessert and mains as well. But yeah, thank you very much. If you could just say goodbye to the part 1 listeners who are the public listeners, and then we'll say hello to the premium and academy members in part 2 and 3. But yeah, thank you very much for being on part 1 so far, Lawrence.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'll put your details in the show notes, but basically YouTube, Brilliantly British. We will leave it there for part 1 of today's episode. Thank you very much for listening up to this point. If you did want to listen to part 2 and part 3 of this conversation, then you can head over to thebritishenglishpodcast.com and check out the premium podcast or academy memberships. The premium podcast gives you access to the full conversation along with extended glossaries, transcripts, and flashcards, whereas the academy gives you all of that plus exclusive videos and audios for the season-based episodes, explaining the vocabulary, exampling them, giving you quizzes, writing assignments, and weekly speaking classes on Zoom. But if you were just here for part 1 of this conversation, then I thank you very much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do grab that free worksheet by clicking the link in the show notes. My name's Charlie, and I will see you next week on the British English Podcast. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Before you go, make sure you know where you stand in your English learning journey. I've created a free English level test that you can take right now to find out your exact level. It's quick, easy, and gives you instant results. Head to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/testme or check the link in the show notes. Because tracking your progress helps you stay on track. We can't use track twice, guys. No, let's do that again. Yeah, we don't have time. Oh. All right, we'll just delete this last sentence then.